This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. This is episode 154. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Strozinski. On today's episode, we figured out who the guy is that WWE is going to push to the moon, and you probably aren't going to like it. We're going to get to that during the news and notes segment, as well as some upsetting news about a former wrestler who recently passed away. Of course, we're going to get into the biggest topics and trends in wrestling, and we do have to touch on what took place at Hell in a Cell. Doing it with me, as always, he's the one, he's the only, he is the Doc John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Ooh, coming on the heels of Hell in a Cell, Bound for Glory, so much to get into. Title changes, new pushes, new angles, different people now getting spotlighted. So it's always a great opportunity to talk professional wrestling, especially on a week like this. So it's a great opportunity to review everything. Oh man, Hell in a Cell, cause I felt like when I was watching it, I'm like, wait a minute, where are all the matches that Adam and I predicted? I was like, what? I'm like, I gotta go talk to my guy about his predictions, because I was like, look, I spent a lot of energy on matches that never happened.
Card is subject to change all the time. I was going to bring that up to you. I was going to say, man, half the matches we picked weren't even on this card. So
that's right. That's my first note.
Going on here?
That was my first note. I'm like, all right, I got to have to actually now proofread these matches because none of them happened.
Look, man, I go to a very credible source for all of the match layouts. And just sometimes WWE will work things in and just kind of change stuff. And look, Hell in a Cell, I think, was a really good pay-per-view. Yeah. I think what we had 2.5, I want to say 4 or 5 star matches. Like, you had 2 really great matches, and then you had a really good one with Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre. And something we didn't account for was The Miz and Otis either.
Yeah.
There were a couple things in this pay-per-view that were absolutely awesome and fantastic. And then there were a couple things where you're just kind of like, okay, we didn't see this coming, or maybe we did. We just didn't see it coming in the Hell in a Cell. But I think where I want to start is I want to start with arguably the best match of the night, which was basically the curtain jerk for the entire show. Roman Reigns taking on Jey Uso in a verbal submission to retain the title. Like, this was an I quit match, and Jey Uso had to say, I give up, I quit. I thought the build to this match was absolutely fantastic. I thought what you had happen inside the match tied everything together so perfectly, with Jimmy and Jay being utilized as these pawns to kind of build up Roman Reigns and to help make this character that much darker, that much more deviant, that much more dangerous. And what you have with Jimmy and Jay now, they're going to slide in and they're going to be his back. They're going to be part of his faction, because what Roman Reigns did, there was a point in this match where Roman Reigns was in tears, crying, but he wasn't crying because of what he had just done to Jimmy Uso. He was crying because of what he was going to do to Jey Uso, which then forced Jimmy to say, I quit, in an attempt to save his brother. And I think that just adds this extra layer, this extra shade of darkness to Roman Reigns. And then for him to go up to the entrance, and you have the Wild Samoans there. You have his father and his uncle there. And it was this crowning moment for Roman Reigns as, hey, I sit at the head of the table. I'm that guy. You must now all fall in line with me. I think this is an awesome, awesome build. And Roman Reigns is probably, actually, no, I'm not even going to say probably. Roman Reigns is the best character in WWE right now.
Exactly. That's the best way you want to open a pay-per-view, with some intrigue, some emotion, some storytelling. It was a great match, and I think you also did something maybe unintended, which is you also elevated the Usos. I think that now you have characters that you can get behind a little bit. Roman Reigns now has put a little bit of rub on them, and it was great storytelling all the way around with emotion. That's what professional wrestling is. I thought it was a great way to kick off, and I thought that probably in my notes, I said that probably one of the things that you wanted to have happen, and actually WWE followed through with it, because the rest of the night, I wasn't exactly thrilled with the results. Not the wrestling. The performers went out there and busted their ass. Each and every match, the Hell in a Cell between Bayley and Sasha was on point. The Hell in a Cell between Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre was on point. But unfortunately, I just feel like, in the biggest match, you don't have Drew McIntyre lose to Randy Orton. It's just, I get it. You can now elevate Randy. You can have Drew McIntyre be on the chase. I just felt like, what better way to keep going than by having Drew McIntyre be the world champion. So I disagreed with that decision. And then I obviously disagreed with, and we talked about it and knew it was going to happen. Once we saw that The Miz was going to be there, it was like, oh man, they're stripping Otis. The angle now, they've deflated him. And it's just a waste. Like now you've kind of debunked the Money in the Bank where now you can wrestle for it, midway through and lose it. It shouldn't be that way. You win the Money in the Bank, you decide when to cash it. And they should have just had Otis cash it in at an inopportune time. They could have even had him cash it in at Hell in a Cell to take a stab and have Drew McIntyre be elevated further. You get to you could have just summed it up and moved Otis along by having potentially Otis cash in against Drew McIntyre after a hellacious win against Randy Orton, and Drew McIntyre wins, after 5 or 6 minutes of a scuffle, and then you could build something there. You could have even Otis be elevated into that picture for a moment, but to have Randy win was disappointing. To have Otis lose was disappointing, and so thankfully Sasha won in a hellacious, amazing contest, which I thought saved the pay-per-view. But by and large, the work rate was awesome. Seeing Drew fall off was always cool. You knew it was going to happen. Seeing Drew and Randy on the top of the cage was a sight to behold. I liked the cage. I liked the Thunderdome feel. But by and large, I just didn't like the results.
Yeah, so The Miz taking the briefcase off of Otis, and I think the big thing to come out of all of this, not just that The Miz now has the Money in the Bank contract, but that Tucker turned on Otis. And I'm not really sure where we go with this, because obviously Otis is now falling back down the card, and Vince McMahon was a huge proponent of Otis getting this nice push. But I don't know what you're going to do with Tucker, because Tucker was just kind of this ancillary piece. He was just a side piece to Otis. So, I mean, we do have Survivor Series coming up, so I could see a match happening there, but that looks like it's going to be a one-and-done situation, because you've got one guy on Raw, you've got one guy on SmackDown, and again, they're not supposed to commingle, even though they do commingle. I'm not sure where we go with this, and I don't like the fact that the Money in the Bank briefcase has now become this gigantic prop. It is almost like it is a belt. It's almost like it's a title where you have to defend it in matches. It shouldn't be one of those things where it is so readily available to be thrust into a match to add a little bit of a stipulation or add a little bit more gusto to something. It really should be one of those things where you win it, you earned it, and then you get to cash it in. And if there's, for some reason, this crazy conflict that takes place over the course of months, you can then add it to a match where it becomes part of the stipulation where the winner will get it. But I don't need to see this like every year. It's like somebody's fighting for this Money in the Bank briefcase. It just doesn't make any sense. And then you totally took the luster off of it. And then you got Randy Orton and you got Drew McIntyre. And I think for long-term storytelling, this was a good match. I don't think this match held up to Roman Reigns or Jey Uso, and I don't think this match held up to Sasha Banks and Bayley, which I want to get to, and I want to spend a little bit of time on that match because I thought that match was fantastic. But I think what you have here is you've got some of the shine being taken off of this match because these guys have fought so much, and they fight every single Monday night. And then what you do is you get them on a pay-per-view where you've already essentially seen this match. It's just now it's surrounded by Hell in a Cell. And I think long story booking, Randy Orton winning was probably the right move. I think for this match, I think Drew McIntyre losing was probably the wrong move. And I think in the end, what's going to happen is it's all going to turn out okay, because I think when we get into Monday Night Raw, we're going to kind of talk about the direction that they're going with this whole Randy Orton thing. And I think there's a lot there, and I think it's good. But I think for this moment, at this time, on this pay-per-view, I think it was probably the wrong decision. But I think something that was fantastic was the Sasha Banks-Bayley match. And I think what you have here was the culmination of multiple years of storytelling. And you have to go all the way back to NXT for these two competitors. for their relationship, to kind of see where it started and then to start to see where it splintered, to then get to this point where you kind of had to be a smart wrestling fan when you watch this match. Because Bayley enters the Hell in the Cell. This is her first Hell in the Cell ever. Sasha Banks has been there, done that. She's wrestled in every women's Hell in the Cell match ever. And she's lost every single one of them. This was her first one she won.
Yep.
And you could see by the way that they attacked each other, Sasha Banks used that knowledge of the ring to her advantage, where she basically used the cage and the cell itself as a weapon, while Bayley used tables, chairs, garbage cans. She used weapons as weapons, whereas Sasha Banks used the actual cell as a weapon to come away with the victory. And I thought this was fantastic. I thought this was great storytelling. And this is what we talk about when we talk about long-term storytelling. This has been building for years, and you got the payoff. And I think it was a hell of a payoff. This was one of those matches that I would say was a 5-star match on Hell in the Cell. You had Sasha Banks and Bayley, and you had Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. And these were fantastic matches. And I think, like you said, the rest of it just kind of fell short. They were good matches as far as the work rate goes, but the storytelling wasn't there. The intrigue wasn't there. Didn't have you vested enough.
Absolutely. And I think but see, unfortunately, you can't, set up pay-per-views month after month after month with every single angle.
Exactly.
With every single angle being that top-notch. So that's why the investment made in the 3 big ones, Sasha Banks, Randy Orton, Drew McIntyre, and Roman Reigns, it delivered. And I think for where WWE could do better is to just build a little bit more intrigue in some of the other situations. And I think that what we're saying
is... But don't you think that's hard? Don't you think that's hard, though? Because
no.
You just mentioned they throw these pay-per-views on every month. I think if we had a longer break between pay-per-views, it'd be much easier and be much better storytelling.
No, what you got to do is just dial up a little bit of the time given to the likes of The Miz and Otis and Tucker and Retribution, because what it is, it's like, okay, the top end talent gets the time, gets the promos, gets the best end of the writers, and then everybody else is like, okay, 50-50 booking and quick, stuff that's not interesting and things that are thrown together. What I think you could do is just dial up a little bit of the intrigue by weaving in, maybe a stare down between The Miz and Roman Reigns. Maybe mix in a little bit of some work for Otis and AJ Styles. Some things like that where you just up, some victories, some time, and some intrigue for some of the mid-level talent. They can do it. It's just that you don't put in the time where you have months and months of storylines. And that's where I think WWE did well with the 3 that they actually delivered on. They had the payoff that you either could, debate or you could be really happy with. So I think the WWE is getting close. The storytelling's a little better. It's not as bad or as awful across the board, top to bottom, as it was. So they're moving in the right direction, but slowly. So for me, it was a B+ pay-per-view. Enjoy it. Hell in a Cell. Not as good as the other ones. I don't think not as good as last year's, but it was still an entertaining byproduct. It was an entertaining show, start to finish, and you could definitely enjoy some time watching wrestling.
So coming out of the pay-per-view, again, we split the point. We tie. I'll take 2 ties.
That's right.
To any losses to you any day of the week.
That's right.
You still lead by 5 points, so I've got my work cut out for me. It's 10.5 to 5.5.
No doubt.
Let's transition into SmackDown. And I've got a question for you as far as storytelling goes. And this was something that we kind of started to see the groundwork laid on the go-home show to Hell in the Cell on Friday night. But I want to know, would you rather see Daniel Bryan heads up for Sami Zayn, or would you rather see Daniel Bryan for Sami Zayn, and then you mix in a guy like Kevin Owens?
No,
so you basically have a 3-way for the Intercontinental belt.
No, heads up. Don't mix in Kevin Owens. You start a feud, end a feud. I'm okay with Daniel Bryan and Sami Zayn.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'd like to just see these 2 guys go at it. Daniel Bryan was, before he came to WWE, was one of the best on the indie scene. Sami Zayn was the same exact way. I want to see these guys go in the ring, rip it up, put on a hell of a show, and I think they would do it. I like Kevin Owens. I don't need to see Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn again. I feel like forever and a day, these 2 guys will forever be locked together. I just don't need to see it. Let Kevin Owens go do something else. Let him go do something else meaningful. Let him be a real player doing anything else but feuding with Sami Zayn. I just don't need to see that. I'd like to transition over to Raw. And real briefly, because what we've got happening here is you did have a pay-per-view that took place on Sunday, and so now we're going to start to get new storylines being built off of what took place. So you have a draft, then you have a pay-per-view, and so now it's almost like peeling the Band-Aid off, and you can start fresh, you can start clean. So we're going to have these new interesting storylines coming out. I want to know if the Fiend versus Randy Orton is the right move in your estimation. You just had Randy Orton lose to Drew McIntyre. So, of course, Drew Mac's going to give a little bit of chase to Randy Orton. But it appears that we are entering into a Fiend versus Randy Orton storyline, which I could argue is way more compelling than what you have going on with Drew McIntyre. And the reason I say it's way more compelling is because the Fiend finally got moved back over to Raw. He's there with Randy Orton. Remember, Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton had a feud a long time ago. They had that awful cockroach match where they had the cockroaches and the bugs on the ring, and Randy Orton burned down the house that supposedly Sister Abigail was in. So the Fiend is now coming back for redemption. He's coming back for revenge, and he is looking to sink his teeth into Randy Orton. On top of all of that, what you have with the Fiend is you have Alexa Bliss playing this character that she has developed, I think, spectacularly. I think she's doing a fantastic job. Something we've talked about Alexa Bliss is she is really, really good in the ring. The problem is she suffers from too many concussions and she gets too beat up. And what happens is she gets sidelined and she can't do anything. So they put her in a tag team with somebody like Nikki Cross, who takes most of the bumps. She'll get the hot tag. She'll run wild for a little bit, and then Nikki Cross will come in and take a couple more bumps. That's just how it works, because they're trying to protect her. But I think her in this role with the Fiend, I think this is magical. I think these two are so damn good together, and I think the Fiend versus Randy Orton, it can be something that could, I mean, WrestleMania I feel like is a little bit of a ways away, but I feel like the Fiend versus Randy Orton is something that could really highlight WrestleMania and really draw you in and give you a lot of interest and intrigue, and I think it would be fantastic.
Absolutely. I think it's great. I think it ties into a previous storyline, so why not? While I'm not happy that Drew McIntyre maybe has been deplatformed and de-emphasized, no problems. You tie in, look, Randy Orton, regarding my preference, is not a guy that's a bum, that doesn't look good wearing the title. Just my preference. I just want to see Drew McIntyre continue to be elevated. I at least want him to get an ovation from some fans. It just won't happen. You know, you're moving forward. And so the 14th reign of Randy Orton should be just fine if you want to even carry it over to WrestleMania. Whoever gets it next will be made, because basically you've paid off the push that you've given Randy Orton. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can't knock it down too much, because it's not a knock against Randy that I'm mad about Drew. So this now going forward, of course, intriguing. Go with it. Tell the story. Retell the story. Just don't air the cockroach match again. Nobody wanted to see that. It was weird. It was a low light of a show. The theatrical match that they did was interesting. So now you can tell more stories, especially going into Survivor Series, which is a little bit darker. No problem at all by me. It should be intriguing.
Now, I want to know if there's anything intriguing or if there's any damn way we can save Retribution, because I feel bad for these guys, but Mustafa Ali, I think, is a dead man walking. I think everybody in Retribution is absolutely cooked. Yeah. You had Mia Yim fake either a seizure or a choking fit or something against the Hurt Business. Hurt Business just ends up running wild in them on Raw. I don't think there is any way that you can save this group. And I feel like this is another one of those half-baked ideas by WWE and their creative team. And what happens is you end up burying 4, 5, 6, 7 wrestlers in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. You tried. Give them credit. Unique idea. But I don't think it's going anywhere. Nobody really seems to like it or seems to want to even invest too much emotion into it. So neither shall we.
Now, you brought up, when we were talking pre-show, you brought up AJ Styles. You really liked this match. AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy.
Good match.
These guys have worked together forever and a day, whether it be in TNA, whether it be in WWE, whether it be wherever. So the fact that they were able to tear down the ring doesn't surprise me. You really seem to be into the new Bodyguard. You seem to be into this new AJ Styles. What has you raptured by AJ Styles here?
Absolutely. 2-0, now 3-0, has a good match. Great finish. I thought they just, they have the chemistry, and AJ Styles a little bit more aggressive. The promo was great. I thought that, okay, now he's going to be on I like that he's like, I don't just want to be on the Raw team for Survivor Series. I want to be the captain. and he's like, this is it. And it's just his bravado. I think you can believe in, this heel persona. I'm a fan. So when AJ Styles goes out there and has a good match against Jeff Hardy, it's quality. And then to see the big man, I love when Jeff Hardy jumped off the top there and the big man catches him. It's like great stuff, great use of a bodyguard. That's what he's supposed to do. Now I just want to see the bodyguard kind of rough up like AJ Styles wins. You pan away, AJ's doing his thing, and then you pan back, and the bodyguard gives a little extra kick. You don't have to do like big moves, maybe like, a DDT or a kick and a power bomb. Just a little extra physicality to say, hey, AJ Styles was here, and here's our mark. So I like it. It's a good look with a little bit of a mid-sized wrestler to have this big dude standing over him. Good look, and it's just the quiet nature is really great. Now you just got to up the aggression a little bit to say, hey, we're here, we're taking it seriously.
Yeah, I think it's great to see AJ Styles kind of get out there and be able to kind of do his own thing, put on a fantastic show. On top of that, he's working a little bit of work and is a little bit rough around the edges, and I think that's going to help pay off. So this is, I think, AJ Styles kind of paying it forward with the future star. So I think it's a fantastic move, and I'm interested to see what happens with AJ Styles going forward. Now, I want your impact on review. I want your review on Impact, not your impact on review. I want your review on Impact. Impact coming off of Bound for Glory, which took place Saturday night. Let me know what you loved about this week's Impact. And if you want to throw in anything about Bound for Glory, please do.
Absolutely. I'll start with Bound for Glory because it was the culmination. You had a new Impact World Champion in Rich Swann, and it was the right move. It was something that was good. It kind of feel-good moment for a guy that's put in his time. I thought Bound for Glory told a lot of good stories, really good stuff. It's basically, for those who don't know, their marquee pay-per-view kind of sets the tone, kind of like their WrestleMania. And you had kind of surprises across the way with Daivari coming back. You have great matches, great storytelling. And I always find it interesting when you have these pay-per-views, what's going to happen. I thought really Eric Young was going to take the title and retain, but it was Rich Swann. And it was a great match. And it was the culmination of months-long storytelling, and you built into it with Rich Swann winning the match. So it was awesome. It was great to see James Storm back at Impact. It was a surprise, so that was good. The one thing I would say that kind of was sad is to keep seeing Ken Shamrock do his thing. Dude is 50 and 50 plus, and to keep getting the spotlight, you just kind of go, man, maybe it's time to hang it up. The biggest surprise for me, though, Moose won against EC3, and I think it might have been a different outcome you could have had by maybe having a little bit of a different situation there with the EC3 Moose match. It was took place from an undisclosed location. It was good, a lot of action, but it just kind of didn't deliver, I would say, best way to put it. Didn't give you the full satisfaction. Rest of the card was good, nothing too major to speak on there. So now you transition over to Impact, and it culminates in an ending storyline with the wedding of John E. Bravo and Rosemary. I thought it was good. Very good segment. It was fun. You had Tommy Dreamer doing a part, so that was good. And then I think now moving forward, what's interesting and what everybody's now been gravitating toward is Su Yung. She now is in the mix with Deonna Purrazzo. People are like, whoa, Su Young's arrival has got a lot of people's attention. So pay attention as the future weeks progress there in regards to her Impact. First hour again of Impact, kind of reserved. Well, surprise actually. To remind everybody, we've said that the first hour has been kind of slow, filled with mid-card talent. Well, what happens now? You start off Impact with a rematch. You have a impromptu match with Swann and Eric Young, and Swann retains. So by and large, you have a good start to Impact to keep you intrigued. Then you transition to, Tommy Dreamer winning against Brian Myers, and then the rest of the mid-card stuff that happens typically in the first hour. So check out Impact. Listen, if you're listening to Doc and Jock Wrestling and you hear our reviews, we're not blowing smoke. Impact has been good. Impact has been entertaining. They've brought storylines to the table and brought stars. I was a little disappointed that Gallows and Anderson didn't get coronated. Yeah, Bound for Glory, but that's fine. It's actually nice to kind of have a slow build. So I'll take it there. Bound for Glory was an A- show in my mind, and Impact this week, solid B all the way around.
Going back to the whole EC3 Moose storyline, I mean, it's a little bit disappointing. It falls a little bit flat, especially when you get week after week of great vignette, and you get this great build to this match, and then it just kind of falls a little bit flat. That's a little bit unfortunate. I do want to transition. Normally we go into NXT. I want to save the best for last this week, and you heard me right. I think NXT was better than AEW. I thought AEW was very good. I thought it was very solid. I thought what we had was some continued build to what they're setting up for Full Gear, and Full Gear looks to be like it's going to be a fantastic show. But to me, it felt like AEW was a little bit trite. It felt like AEW knew what it was doing and what it wanted to do. I think you got 2 solid matches for the AEW Championship Eliminator. It totally set up the way we thought it was going to set up, so no big surprises there. And I felt like that might have been a little bit of a letdown. So you're going to have Kenny Omega and you're going to have Hangman Page squaring off for the number 1 contender to the AEW champion at Full Gear. And that's fine. It's fantastic. Again, we predicted this a couple weeks ago. We thought this was how it was going to shake out. I felt like you missed an opportunity as AEW to maybe put somebody else over, to maybe give somebody else a little bit of a ride here. And I think that guy could have possibly been Wardlow. And you could have did a little bit more character development with Hangman Page. Hangman Page loses to Wardlow, which I don't think anybody would have seen coming. And then you could have Omega versus Wardlow. Wardlow could get a little bit of a rub from wrestling with Omega. Omega could go on to win the whole damn thing. But I felt like it was a little bit of a letdown there and a little bit of a botch. And it wasn't bad, but I just felt like it was too damn predictable. And that's a little bit frustrating coming from AEW.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the sense that everybody got was, you could have maybe had a little bit more impact, a little bit more resolution. But kind of basically it looks like, so it felt like a show that went through the motion because they needed to get to the next thing. And you can't do that week after week. You got to move it forward and handle business. So I agree. NXT was, I think, the better show this week.
Mm-hmm. And coming out of AEW, you ended up with MJF and Chris Jericho. They're going to have a match at Full Gear. Stipulation is if MJF beats Chris Jericho, he gets to get into the inner circle. If Chris Jericho wins, I don't know what happens here. Like I felt like this, while the culmination, the build of this has been fantastic, I felt like the stipulation on this was just kind of half baked, and they were trying to do something a little bit too cutesy. And I'm sure we're going to get a fantastic match because Jericho's great, MJF is great. I just felt like you were trying to be a little bit too smart, and when you were trying to be a little bit too smart, you look kind of silly now. I'm not sure how you feel about this MJF Chris Jericho storyline that's going into Full Gear.
I'm okay with it. I think it'll be fine. It'll be hopefully a culmination of maybe Chris Jericho. Maybe you could even extend this out a little bit and elevate MJF where MJF wins, but then he doesn't get to get in. You have them turn fully and you elevate that feud going further into further matches.
So do we get MJF as a babyface then?
Maybe, maybe.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's where they're trying to look at it, trying to how you best elevate. Or you have him win straight up, earn the respect, and get in, and then have the full support of a faction as he makes his next run at the title.
It'll be interesting to see. Now we talked about NXT and how it was better than AEW. So NXT was celebrating Halloween Havoc, which was a former WCW pay-per-view. And I think the majority of this show, and I think the majority of what we're going to talk about, is what's going on with a guy like Pat McAfee. I'm not sure about you, but this guy, for being a former punter, being a kind of radio host, now he has his own radio show, but he was just kind of like doing podcasts and things before. He was just like us, except he was like an athlete. He is probably the best guy in all of WWE on the mic. I don't think since we've had a guy like The Rock, you have ever had a guy as comfortable as Pat McAfee looks when he has a microphone in his hand, or when he's out there acting or wrestling or portraying whatever this character is. Pat McAfee looks like he is a guy who is so comfortable in his own skin. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I love what he's doing with this new faction. He took 2 guys who were kind of there, but I think he's helped elevate them to a new level. And then I'm just going to go through this whole part of the rundown, John. I'm sorry. You then work in a guy like Pete Dunne, who we haven't seen in months. And boy, does Pete Dunne look like he's in fantastic freaking shape. Pete Dunne looks like he could rip the lid off of a metal can with his teeth, and he would just chew up the aluminum and spit it right back at you in the shape of a bullet. This faction, led by Pat McAfee, with the muscle of Pete Dunne and Orny and Loken, is just out of my mind right now. I think what you might see here is you may see a handing off of the factions. Forever and a Day, Undisputed Era, has ran NXT. I think what you might get now is this faction ran by Pat McAfee. And I don't think we have a name for it yet, but I think this faction ran by Pat McAfee, this might be the new hot faction in all of NXT that's going to run the show. Don't be surprised if that's the case.
Absolutely. What's not to love? Everything's entertaining, it's fun, it's intriguing, and it draws eyes. It's an A+ all the way around.
I think I'm so blown away by how good he is in the ring and how fantastic he was. I think the other thing coming out of NXT, I want to get your sense on what you took out of the Cameron Grimes and Dexter Lumis match, where it was a haunted house and it ended up ending in the ring. So this was another one of those WWE productions where they film everything and then they present it all. And I thought the beginning of it was really interesting. Like, I watched the whole thing. I didn't fast forward through any of it. I thought it was really, really good. And then you have Cameron Grimes running for like 7 miles to get back to the Performance Center. And then he gets there and it's a little bit creepy and things are a little bit different. And then it just ends with Dexter Lumis doing a couple moves in the ring. And then it just kind of felt like it was like wah, 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 wah. It just kind of fell flat. Like, it was really, really good. It was really, really entertaining. It was kind of spooky. And you ended up with what I felt like was a bag of poop on your front porch.
Exactly. That's what I wrote in my notes. Bad ending. You can't have this cinematic type situation where the endings don't exactly live up to expectations. So can't do that. So it was disappointing for me. That's why I graded that match myself personally a C-. I thought great storytelling, great theatrical. These two belong in a feud and belong, in the ring together, but you can't have endings like that. It fell flat.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't good. Overall, I thought this was a pretty solid week of wrestling. Interested to see where we go with what's going on Monday Night Raw, and I'm interested to see what we do with SmackDown. AEW is setting up for a great Fast Gear on November 7th. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds in the coming weeks.
Absolutely, and just elevate the mid-card. That's all you got to do. Right now, your top end is rounding into shape. You got a lot of You have a lot of top-end talent that's doing amazing things. Now you just got to elevate the mid-card, and then you'll have yourself an amazing Survivor Series. And I think it's trending toward this year being a Raw-dominated Survivor Series. I think that Raw has the top-end talent. They got the best storylines, and I think that the match in and of itself will be awesome, but I think you're going to see a lot of wins from the Red Brand going into the Survivor Series. All right, cuz, hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What top your list this week?
Former NWA Women's Champion Thunder Rosa is getting a ton of interest from both WWE and AEW.
Cashing in.
Now, she was working on AEW because of NWA's working relationship with AEW, but AEW hasn't really called her or booked her or offered her a contract. She just recently dropped her championship. So WWE is also in hot pursuit of her. Now, according to Dave Meltzer, Lars Sullivan is the only guy Vince McMahon and other WWE higher-ups want to elevate up the card right now. Meltzer said, there's nobody. Nobody. But when you're talking about one guy that they're elevating, Lars Sullivan, that's the guy. So whether you like Lars Sullivan or you don't, he looks like he is the apple of Vince McMahon's eye right now. So watch for him to get a monster push going forward. And WWE announced Wednesday that former WWE, ECW, and WCW wrestling star Tracy Smothers died at the age of 58. According to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful, Smothers announced last year on Facebook that he had been diagnosed with lymphoma. There was a massive outpouring from the wrestling world on Wednesday when the news broke of Smothers' death. And that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Shout out to Mike Putty. who listens and reviews wrestling, tells us what we like to hear. I really appreciate Mike Putnam, and so give him a shout out in his top 5.
Bro, Putty will tell you things that you don't even want to hear. He's like, hey, you should check this out. I'm like, Putty, no, it's horrible. He's like, no, it's great. And I was like, no, I don't know about that, buddy.
So make sure, Mike, start another account and leave another review. I don't think maybe you have reviewed our podcast, but just start another account on iTunes and leave another review and make it like really long and glorious. The free messages on Facebook are great, but we need people to write it on iTunes. So go do that. And anybody else, subscribe to the podcast. Be like Mike. We'll shout you out, put your stuff over. Mike does great work, too. The Top 5 for Fighting podcast is really interesting.
So good.
And he's anti-Lions, too. A little strong there, but I like it.
He's pro-Michigan, though.
Yeah. All right, so 50-50. 50% rating from the DOC. Oh, man. Okay, give a little higher. 80% rating. He's a good
115% from the job, for sure.
Make sure you go to any place you listen to podcasts. Type in 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast, and you can subscribe, and our daily content will find you. Look forward to breaking down wrestling again next week. Good stuff from WWE, AEW, NXT, and right now, Impact doing some good stuff. They just need a couple more stars, a couple more mid-card dudes, and they can round out their show as well. Maybe get some more A's on their programming. Talk soon, cuz. Look forward to the next edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.
Look forward to another week of wrestling, brother.